Any other nightmares down there? That's enough nightmares. Let me ask another question here from the audience. Define the specific themes where the public and private sectors can collaborate. Where can we work together best in the public and private sectors, in your opinion? Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we first started to put together private-public partnerships in the United States about 1996, there were three major themes we looked at. One of them was identification of vulnerabilities that existed in our infrastructure. The second one involved threats that we were seeing individually against various companies and against government agencies. And the third one was sharing of best practices. I think in many cases those still apply today. We need to make sure we're doing the joint identification of vulnerabilities amongst, in many cases, competitors and importantly with the government. We must look at what are the best practices that we're seeing out there. And I didn't put the threats as high in there because the threats are out there. I think we have a good recognition of what a lot of the threats are, and the threats become less effective or reduce the vulnerabilities. We're doing the best practices, we're sharing the information. From the government's perspective, one of the things we're dedicated to, and that's increasing the amount of information that we're sharing. As some of you are probably aware, in March of this year, we directed the release of the unclassified description of the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. How can you do partnerships with private industry? How can you do it with other governments if everything's behind a veil of secrecy? And in this world, in this environment today, we really need to make sure that the sharing of information is there, but more importantly, it's information that can be shared that gives the ability for somebody to execute on something that's actionable. So actually removing that veil and saying, here's what we're seeing, here's what you can do to stop it, and making sure they have the ability to institute that.
Congressman.
Well, you know, obviously the private sector controls most of the critical infrastructure out there. And the ISACs, the Information Sharing Analysis Centers, have been around for a while. But I think Howard's great task is to reinforce and invigorate those information sharing centers. And I think one of the great challenges with them that my experience has been the reluctance to share threat or vulnerabilities with the federal government because of the duty to shareholders. That has to be shared in a way that keeps it anonymous, and it's got to be protected from things like the FOIA. Because if you don't have the FOIA exemption, that could be discovered, and then private sector will never share information with the federal government. And I also think the federal government needs to incentivize security software in the private sector. Now, most of the major companies have pretty good security software, but I think that would go a long ways in terms of if we could incentivize just companies across the board to purchase that security software.
Yes, Mr. Sakamoto.
Japan created a scheme called the SEPTA, like Isaac, to share information among critical infrastructure operators in 2009. And currently, 10 business sectors, including telecommunications, electronic power supply, and financial service, for example, are involved in this scheme. And I imagine there are different styles of public-private partnerships among different countries. But we have similar headaches, and we share the desire to enhance our response capabilities against cyber attacks. Japan can share our SEPTA cases, as I mentioned, and experience it with other countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Pello.
Yeah, something to add on public-private partnership. One of the key issues because of course we need that, and that's completely obvious. One of the key issues is to develop the maturity and the transparency. You can't imagine the number of cases when I go to the big companies and ask, well, I have some information about attacks against you. What is the situation? Do you have any attacks? How is your IT system? And most of the time, the answer is, wow, we have quite no attack, 1 or 2 each year, or everything is okay. We have a very secure system. But it's, of course, not the reality. So if we want to really develop a real partnership, we need to be more transparent. We need to be honest with us and say, okay, we are under attack. Some of these attacks succeed, and we need to exchange. So we can't keep with the eyes closed and say, well, in my company, everything is okay. If we want to develop this partnership, we need a little to open the doors and say, well, that's the reality. As a government, we need your help. We need your information. We need to know what happened in your companies. And you need, of course, in companies, you need our threat analysis, perhaps some of our tools and things like that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just a very brief comment. Maybe we should try to put the question another round. Is there a sector where we can't use public and private partnership? And my answer to that is no, because the public sector doesn't have the necessary resources to do a proper job.
Very good. The next question, and this will stimulate your thinking. Is there enough understanding of technology among policy makers? And what can engineers do to help more? This might be described as one of the great divides that we all deal with on a daily basis. Yes, Congressman.
Well, yeah, I guess that's directed at me. But I think I've already answered this when I initially said I'm amazed at the lack of interest or knowledge on part of many policymakers when it comes to cybersecurity. Technologies, I'm on the Science and Technology Committee as well. I think there is a good understanding of technology, but not in the cybersecurity world. And I think some members are finally coming around to the idea this is a serious issue. I co-chair the Cybersecurity Caucus. I think some of our military leaders are finally coming out and talking about this, like General Cartwright, who's probably the expert on this issue, along with General Radke. When Admiral Mullen was asked, what do you perceive to be the greatest security threat? He could have said Iran, which it probably is, Pakistan, Afghanistan, but he mentioned cybersecurity because he knows the capability that we have as a nation, and he doesn't want to see that capability in other nations' hands that could do us harm. And so I think when we have leaders like that emphasize the issue, I think that does start to get the attention of members of Congress. I think they're finally coming around to this as being an important issue. But I consider that to be one of my jobs, is to continue to inform and educate and hopefully enlighten other members.
I can mention that Congressman McCall had a great idea in the U.S. Congress, in the fact that, as he's already said, there's just not enough knowledge there and understanding and awareness, the kind of things that we were even addressing in our dinner last night. And he mentioned he started this congressional caucus. And I think the first one we held, attendance was fairly limited. The second one we held, we were busting at the seams. In fact, people were standing in the aisles and clamoring to get in. Congressional members, principals, and also their staff members. So when you take these kind of initiatives to move forward, I think you have the opportunity that people want to learn more about this, and I applaud the efforts of the congressman in spreading the word throughout our U.S. Capitol Hill. So, Minister Lang.
Well, this is a good possibility to deliver a good political speech. But to answer the question, I think there is a lack of understanding among the political